The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as Lyra, the Bajoran lead scientist, revealed her findings. Humans, the newcomers to interstellar travel, were outpacing every other species in colonization efforts, using nothing more than their ancient breeding methods. "Impossible!" shouted Zixalar, the Arcturian representative. "How can natural reproduction be more efficient than our advanced technologies?" Lyra's holographic display flickered, showing graphs of human population growth across various colonies. The numbers were staggering, dwarfing the expansion rates of even the most prolific council races. "The data doesn't lie," Lyra stated, her voice calm amidst the uproar. "Human colonies are thriving on planets where other species have struggled for centuries. Their reproductive rates are unprecedented." The council members exchanged worried glances. Humanity's rapid expansion threatened to upset the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. Something had to be done. "We need to understand their methods," Lyra continued. "I propose embedding a researcher in a human colony to observe their breeding practices up close." Murmurs of dissent rippled through the chamber. Close contact with humans was considered risky due to their unpredictable nature. However, the potential benefits were too great to ignore. After hours of heated debate, the council reluctantly agreed to Lyra's plan. They selected Matthew Murphy, a prominent human colonist known for his large family, as the subject of their study. Lyra, with her expertise in xenobiology and physical similarity to humans, was chosen to lead the mission. Equipped with advanced cloaking technology, Lyra arrived on Proxima Centauri b, home to one of the most successful human colonies. The harsh alien environment, with its dangerous native fauna and unpredictable weather patterns, posed significant challenges. Yet the human settlement continued to grow and thrive. Lyra began her covert observation of the Murphy family, meticulously documenting their daily lives, social interactions, and reproductive habits. She watched as Matthew, the colony's agricultural director, worked tirelessly to develop new farming techniques to support the expanding population. The Bajoran researcher found herself fascinated by the emotional bonds between Matthew, his pregnant wife, and their children. These instinctual behaviors seemed to drive human reproduction in ways she had never observed in other species. As days turned into weeks, Lyra's reports to the Galactic Council became increasingly favorable towards humans. She noted how the colony's challenges appeared to strengthen pair bonds and increase reproductive rates, a phenomenon unheard of in other species. Lyra's findings caused concern among some council members who feared the rising human influence in the galaxy. Debates raged over whether to end the study prematurely or take more drastic action to curb human expansion. As she continued her research, Lyra found herself questioning the council's dismissive attitude towards human abilities. The primitive methods they employed were yielding results that put the most advanced alien reproductive technologies to shame. With tensions rising in the Galactic Council and her admiration for human resilience growing, Lyra faced a difficult decision. Should she maintain her cover and continue her groundbreaking research, or warn the humans of the potential threat from the very institution that sent her? As Matthew Murphy tended to his crops, blissfully unaware of the alien scrutiny, the fate of humanity's galactic future hung in the balance. The Galactic Council's shock at the effectiveness of human breeding methods was about to trigger a series of events that would reshape the cosmos. As Matthew Murphy tended to his crops, the air in the agricultural dome hummed with the sound of machinery and the chatter of workers. Lyra, hidden by her cloaking device, observed him with growing fascination. His movements were efficient, his interactions with fellow colonists warm and genuine. She marveled at how these seemingly simple behaviors contributed to the colony's unprecedented success. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine pierced the air. Lyra's cloaking device flickered, its holographic camouflage wavering like a mirage. She glanced down in panic, realizing the colony's power grid was interfering with her technology. Before she could react, the device failed completely, leaving her exposed in the middle of the dome. Gasps and shouts of alarm erupted around her. Workers dropped their tools, backing away from the alien that had materialized in their midst. Lyra froze, her mind racing to find a way out of this catastrophe. Matthew's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone, stay calm!" He approached Lyra slowly, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. His eyes, a striking blue that Lyra had never seen up close, studied her with curiosity rather than fear. "I'm Matthew Murphy, agricultural director of this colony," he said, his voice steady. "Who are you, and how did you get here?" Lyra's training kicked in. She straightened her posture, mirroring Matthew's calm demeanor. "I'm Dr. Lyra Nax, a xenobiologist from the Epsilon Eridani colony." She lied smoothly, drawing on her knowledge of distant human settlements. "I apologize for the alarming entrance. My personal cloaking device malfunctioned during my observation of your impressive agricultural techniques." Matthew's eyebrows rose. "A cloaking device? That's some advanced tech for a human colony." "We've made significant strides in adaptive camouflage," Lyra explained, her mind working overtime to maintain her cover. "It's essential for studying potentially dangerous alien flora and fauna." Matthew nodded, seemingly satisfied with her explanation. His face broke into a warm smile that sent an unexpected flutter through Lyra's chest. "Well, Dr. Nax, since you're here, perhaps you'd be willing to lend us your expertise. We've been struggling with some particularly resilient crop-destroying insects." Lyra saw an opportunity to salvage her mission and gain closer access to her subject. "I'd be honored to help, Director Murphy." Over the next few weeks, Lyra worked alongside Matthew to develop a natural pesticide using native Proxima Centauri bee flora. She found herself increasingly drawn into the colony's daily life, observing human interactions with a newfound intimacy. One evening, as they worked late in the lab, Matthew received a call from his wife, Sarah. Lyra watched as his face softened, his entire demeanor changing as he spoke to her. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice tender. "How are you feeling? Did the baby kick again?" He listened for a moment, then laughed. "That's our little fighter. I'll be home soon, I promise." As he ended the call, Matthew caught Lyra staring. "Sorry about that," he said, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. "Sarah's due any day now, and I guess I'm a bit overexcited." Lyra shook her head, fascinated by the emotional display. "There's no need to apologize. Your dedication to your family is admirable." Matthew's eyes crinkled with a smile. "Family is everything here. It's what drives us to keep pushing forward, to make this harsh world livable for the next generation." His words struck a chord in Lyra. She thought of her own people, the Bajorans, and their clinical approach to reproduction. There was no warmth, no excitement, just a biological imperative to be fulfilled. For the first time, she began to understand the true power behind humanity's explosive growth. As days passed, Lyra found herself spending more time with the Murphy family. She watched Matthew play with his children, his laughter echoing through their modest home. She observed Sarah's pregnancy, noting the community's support and celebration of new life. These interactions stirred unfamiliar emotions in Lyra, a longing for connection she had never experienced before. One afternoon, as Lyra and Matthew worked on refining their pesticide formula, an alarm blared through the colony. Matthew's communicator buzzed urgently. "Murphy here," he answered, his voice tense. "Director, we've detected an unidentified ship entering the system," a panicked voice reported. "It's not responding to hails and is on a direct course for the colony." Matthew's face hardened. "I'll be right there." He turned to Lyra, apology in his eyes. "I'm sorry, but I need to go. We have protocols for situations like this, but they've never been tested." As he rushed out, Lyra felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She knew exactly what that ship was, the Zorgon scout sent by the Galactic Council to check on her progress. Her deception was about to unravel, and the humans she had come to admire were in danger. Lyra stood in the empty lab, her mind racing. She had a choice to make: maintain her cover and protect her mission, or reveal the truth and potentially save the colony from the aggressive Zorgons. As the colony's defense systems whirred to life outside, Lyra grappled with her conflicting loyalties and the unexpected emotions that had taken root in her heart. The approaching Zorgon ship loomed like a harbinger of doom, forcing Lyra to confront the consequences of her actions and the true nature of her feelings for Matthew and the human colonists. As alarms blared and colonists rushed to their assigned stations, Lyra knew that her next decision would shape not only her fate, but potentially the future of human-alien relations in the galaxy. As alarms blared throughout the colony, Matthew's communicator buzzed again. He answered it quickly, his face grim. "Murphy here. What's the situation?" "Director, the unidentified ship has entered orbit," the voice on the other end reported. "It's scanning the planet's surface. We're detecting energy signatures consistent with advanced weaponry." Matthew's teeth gritted. "Initiate Protocol Sigma. Get all non-essential personnel to the emergency shelters. I'm on my way to the command center." He turned to Lyra, his blue eyes filled with dedication. "Dr. Nax, I need your expertise. Will you help us?" Lyra felt the weight of her deception pressing down on her. She knew she had to make a choice, and quickly. "Matthew, there's something I need to tell you first. In private." Confusion flashed across Matthew's face, but he nodded. "My office. Now." As soon as the door closed behind them, Lyra deactivated her human disguise. Matthew stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock, as he took in her true Bajoran features. "What? Who are you?" he gasped. Lyra took a deep breath. "My name is Lyra Nax, but I'm not from Epsilon Eridani. I'm a Bajoran scientist sent by the Galactic Council to study human reproduction methods." Matthew's expression hardened. "You've been spying on us? On my family?" "Yes," Lyra admitted, her voice filled with regret. "But Matthew, you need to understand. The ship in orbit isn't just any threat. It's a Zorgon scout sent by the Council to check on my progress. They're here because of me, and they won't hesitate to destroy this colony if they detect any sign of advanced technology." Matthew paced the small office, running a hand through his hair. "Why are you telling me this now?" Lyra stepped closer to him. "Because in the time I've spent here, I've come to admire your people. Your resilience, your ingenuity, your capacity for love. I can't stand by and watch the Council destroy what you've built." Matthew studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. After a long moment, he nodded. "All right, what do you suggest we do?" "We need to hide the colony," Lyra said. "Make it look like nothing more than natural terrain." A spark of inspiration lit up Matthew's eyes. "The weather control system. We could use it to create a massive fog bank, and then we could manipulate the native plant life to form a living camouflage," Lyra finished, excitement building in her voice. Matthew grinned, despite the gravity of the situation. "Exactly. I'll coordinate with the agricultural team. Can you adapt your cloaking technology to enhance our efforts?" Lyra nodded. "I'll need access to your labs, but it's possible." "Done," Matthew said, already moving towards the door. "Let's move." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Matthew directed teams of colonists to plant fast-growing native vines and mosses in strategic patterns across the settlement. Lyra worked feverishly in the lab, modifying her personal cloaking device to project a larger field that could interact with the plant life. As the Zorgon ship drew closer, a thick fog rolled across the landscape, obscuring the colony from view. Beneath the misty blanket, the enhanced plant life grew at an astonishing rate, forming a living tapestry that mimicked the surrounding terrain. Matthew and Lyra stood atop the main agricultural dome, watching as the last traces of human habitation disappeared beneath the verdant camouflage. The hum of the colony's systems was muffled by the dense vegetation, creating an eerie silence. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, awed by the seamless blend of technology and nature. Matthew nodded, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "Let's hope it's enough." Suddenly, a series of bright flashes lit up the fog overhead. Matthew's communicator crackled to life. "Director, we're detecting multiple atmospheric entries. The Zorgon ship has deployed a scouting party." Matthew's grip tightened on the railing. "Understood. Maintain radio silence unless absolutely necessary. Murphy out." He turned to Lyra, his face set with persistence. "We need to keep an eye on those scouts. If they get too close..." Lyra understood the unspoken implication. "I'm coming with you." Together, they made their way down from the dome and out into the misty, overgrown landscape that had once been the colony's main square. They moved cautiously, using the dense foliage for cover as they approached the edge of the settlement. In the distance, they could hear the low hum of Zorgon anti-gravity units. Matthew signaled for Lyra to stop, and they crouched behind a large, gnarled root. The fog parted, revealing 3 Zorgon scouts. Their reptilian features were partially obscured by sleek environmental suits, and they carried weapons that pulsed with an ominous energy. The aliens moved with predatory grace, their forked tongues flicking out to taste the air. Matthew leaned close to Lyra, his breath warm against her ear. They're heading straight for the hydroponics facility. If they scan it... Lyra nodded, her mind racing. We need a distraction, something to draw them away without revealing our presence. Matthew's eyes lit up. The Thundra beasts. There's a herd that grazes about a kilometer east of here. If we could lure them this way... The Zorgons would have no choice but to retreat, Lyra finished. But how do we get the creature's attention without exposing ourselves? Matthew grinned, a hint of mischief in his expression. Sometimes the old ways are best. Come on. They crept through the underbrush, moving parallel to the Zorgon scouts' path. After several tense minutes, they reached a small clearing where several large bovine-like creatures were grazing. The Thundra beasts lived up to their name, with massive, barrel-shaped bodies and wickedly curved horns that crackled with bioelectrical energy. Matthew picked up a small stone and handed it to Lyra. When I give the signal, throw this as hard as you can at that big one's flank, then be ready to run. Lyra's eyes widened. Are you sure about this? Not at all, Matthew chuckled softly, but it's the best plan we've got. He raised his hand, watching the Zorgon scouts through the mist. When the aliens were just at the edge of the clearing, Matthew dropped his arm. Now! Lyra hurled the stone with all her might. It struck the largest Thundra beast with a satisfying thwack. The creature bellowed, bioelectrical sparks flying from its horns. In an instant, the entire herd was in motion, charging directly towards the unsuspecting Zorgon scouts. Run! Matthew shouted, grabbing Lyra's hand. They sprinted through the underbrush, the sound of thundering hooves and panicked alien shrieks filling the air behind them. As they ran, Lyra felt an unexpected thrill. Despite the danger, despite the lies and deception that had brought her here, in this moment she felt more alive than she ever had before. Matthew pulled her behind a massive tree trunk just as a Zorgon scout flew past, its anti-gravity unit sputtering and sparking. They pressed close together, hearts pounding, as more Thundra beasts charged by. When the sounds of chaos finally began to fade, Matthew turned to Lyra. Their faces were inches apart, and Lyra could see flecks of gold in his blue eyes. For a moment, the galaxy beyond ceased to exist. There was only this man, this human who had shown her what it truly meant to be alive. We did it, Matthew breathed, a grin spreading across his face. Lyra found herself smiling back. We did. But as they shared this moment of triumph, a low, menacing hum filled the air. They looked up to see a Zorgon scout hovering above them, its weapon trained directly at their hiding spot. Matthew and Lyra froze, their momentary victory evaporating in the face of this new threat. The Zorgon's reptilian eyes narrowed, its forked tongue flicking out as if tasting their fear on the air. In that instant, Lyra realized that their plan, their deception, and perhaps their very lives hung by the thinnest of threads. Threads. The Zorgon's weapon hummed ominously, its energy building to a lethal crescendo. In that frozen moment, Lyra's mind raced. She knew the Zorgon suit had one crucial weakness, a small vent at the base of the neck that regulated internal temperature. With lightning speed, she scooped up a handful of damp earth and hurled it at the alien's face. The mud splattered across the Zorgon's visor, momentarily blinding it. Its shot went wide, searing a nearby tree trunk. Matthew seized the opportunity, tackling the disoriented scout. They grappled on the forest floor, Matthew using his larger frame to pin the Zorgon down. Lyra, the vent, he shouted. She didn't hesitate. Lyra jammed her fingers into the small opening at the base of the Zorgon's helmet. The alien thrashed wildly, but Matthew held firm. Within seconds, the scout's movements grew sluggish, then ceased altogether as its suit's life support systems failed. Matthew rolled off the motionless Zorgon, his chest heaving. We need to move. Now! They sprinted through the underbrush, acutely aware that the scout's sudden silence would soon draw attention. As they ran, the terrain began to change, the forest giving way to rocky outcrops. Ahead, a mountain range loomed, its peaks shrouded in mist. There, Lyra pointed, her keen Bajoran eyes spotting an anomaly in the mountain face. That formation doesn't look natural. They approached cautiously, finding a well-concealed entrance set into the rock. Lyra's breath caught as she recognized the subtle architectural markers. This is Bajoran, an old outpost, likely abandoned centuries ago. Matthew's eyes widened. Can we use it? Lyra nodded, her fingers already tracing the hidden locking mechanism. With a soft click, the door slid open, revealing a dark interior. They slipped inside, closing the entrance behind them. As their eyes adjusted to the dimness, the outpost came to life around them. Lights flickered on, illuminating sleek consoles and banks of equipment. Lyra moved to a central terminal, her hands dancing over the controls. This is incredible, she breathed. The station's been in standby mode all this time, waiting for Bajoran life signs to reactivate it. Matthew examined the unfamiliar technology with a mix of awe and trepidation. Can you contact your people, the Galactic Council? Lyra's fingers flew across the console. Yes, I'm establishing a secure channel now. As she worked, Matthew paced the small command center, his mind racing. We need to warn the colony. Let them know what's happening. Lyra looked up from her task, her expression grave. Matthew, I can't do that. Not yet. If we alert the colony, we risk exposing their position to the Zorgons. Matthew's eyes hardened, but he nodded reluctantly. You're right. But we need a plan to protect them. Before Lyra could respond, the communication console chimed. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a stern-faced Bajoran official. Agent Nax, the official said, his tone clipped. Report. Lyra straightened, slipping into a formal posture. Counselor Venn, we have a situation. A Zorgon scout ship has entered the system and is actively searching for the human colony. They've deployed ground forces and are using advanced scanning technology. Venn's eyes narrowed. And the status of your mission? Lyra hesitated, acutely aware of Matthew's presence behind her. The mission parameters have evolved, sir. The human colonists have demonstrated remarkable ingenuity in response to this threat. I believe they warrant further study and potential protection. The counselor's expression hardened. That is not your decision to make, Agent Nax. The council will deliberate on this matter. For now, maintain your cover and continue gathering data. Venn out. The hologram vanished, leaving a tense silence in its wake. Lyra turned to Matthew, finding his blue eyes fixed on her with an unreadable expression. You didn't tell them everything, he said quietly. Lyra shook her head. No, I didn't. The council, they don't always see the bigger picture. They're not here. They haven't seen what I've seen. Matthew stepped closer, his gaze intense. And what have you seen, Lyra? She met his eyes, feeling a surge of emotions she couldn't quite name. I've seen a people who refuse to be beaten, who face impossible odds with creativity and persistence. I've seen families supporting each other, communities coming together. I've seen... She paused, her voice softening. I've seen you, Matthew. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Matthew opened his mouth to respond, but a sharp beeping from the console interrupted the moment. Lyra turned back to the display, her eyes widening as she interpreted the data. The Zorgon ship is increasing its scanning frequency. They're getting frustrated, casting a wider net. Matthew leaned in, studying the readouts. Our camouflage is holding, but for how long? Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up more detailed scans. The interference from the planet's electromagnetic field is helping, but it won't be enough if they keep escalating their search patterns. Matthew's brow furrowed in concentration. Wait, the electromagnetic field. Lyra, could we use that? She looked at him, intrigued. What are you thinking? The colony's power grid, Matthew explained, his words coming faster as the idea took shape. If we could modify it to emit a specific frequency, we might be able to create a larger-scale interference, something that would completely scramble their sensors. Lyra's eyes lit up with understanding. Yes, And if we combine that with some of the shielding technology from this outpost, they worked feverishly. Matthew's practical knowledge of the colony's systems meshing seamlessly with Lyra's understanding of advanced alien technology. As they collaborated, Lyra found herself increasingly impressed by Matthew's quick thinking and adaptability. Hours passed as they refined their plan, pausing only to monitor the Zorgon's movements and check on the colony's status through the outpost's long-range sensors. The lack of direct communication with the settlement caused great concern on Matthew, but he channeled his concern into their work. As the planet's sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mountain range, Lyra and Matthew finalized their jamming device design. They stood side by side, examining the holographic blueprint they'd created. "It's not perfect," Matthew said, running a hand through his hair, "but it's the best chance we've got." Lyra nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. "We'll need to get back to the colony to implement it. The trek won't be easy, especially with the increased Zorgon activity." Matthew turned to her, his expression determined. "We'll make it. Together." As they prepared to leave the relative safety of the outpost, Lyra felt a strange flutter in her chest. She'd come to this planet as an observer, a scientist studying an alien species. Now, standing beside Matthew, she realized she'd become something else entirely, a protector, a friend, and perhaps something more. The door of the outpost slid open, revealing the darkening landscape beyond. Matthew and Lyra shared a look of understanding before stepping out into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their mission to save the colony and outsmart the Zorgon threat. As Matthew and Lyra emerged from the outpost, the cool night air filled their lungs. The distant hum of Zorgon ships served as a constant reminder of the danger they faced. They moved swiftly through the shadowy landscape, their footsteps muffled by the soft forest floor. Days later, their plan successfully implemented, the colony breathed a collective sigh of relief. The Zorgon threat had been neutralized, at least for now. Matthew stood at the edge of the settlement, gazing out at the fields that stretched before him. The warm breeze carried the scent of ripening crops, a smell that usually brought him comfort. But today, it only heightened his growing sense of unease. "Matthew," Dr. Tucker's voice cut through his thoughts. The colony's chief medical officer jogged towards him, worry etched on his face. "We've got a problem." Matthew's brow furrowed. "What is it?" "The pollinator species, they're not showing up. The jamming device seems to have disrupted their migration patterns." The implications hit Matthew like a physical blow. Without pollinators, their crops would fail. The colony's food security, already precarious, would be in serious jeopardy. "Gather the agricultural team," Matthew said, his mind already racing through potential solutions. "We need to start manual pollination immediately." As the colony mobilized to address this new crisis, Lyra found herself working closely with Matthew once again. Her alien perspective proved invaluable as they developed alternative farming methods and struggled to understand the complex ecosystem of their adopted world. One evening, as they pored over data in the makeshift command center, Sarah appeared in the doorway. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. Matthew and Lyra, heads bent close together over a holographic display, their easy familiarity evident in every gesture. "Matthew," Sarah's voice was tight, "can I speak with you for a moment?" As Matthew stepped away, Lyra couldn't help but notice the tension between the couple. She turned back to her work, trying to ignore the twinge of guilt and something else that twisted in her chest. Weeks passed, and the colony's efforts began to show results. The manual pollination was labor-intensive, but effective. New farming techniques, inspired by Lyra's knowledge of other worlds, were implemented with growing success. But just as things seemed to be stabilizing, a new challenge arose. The colony's long-range sensors detected an approaching ship, far larger and more advanced than anything they'd encountered before. "It's a Galactic Council vessel," Lyra explained, her face pale as she studied the readouts. "The Celestial Envoy." Matthew felt a chill run down his spine. "Are they here to help us?" Lyra's expression was grim. "I'm not sure. The ship is commanded by Admiral Zorn. He's not known for his fondness of human expansion." As the celestial envoy entered orbit, the colony buzzed with nervous energy. Matthew, as the de facto leader during the crisis, prepared to meet with the council representatives. He insisted on bringing a small delegation, including Lyra, whose presence he found oddly reassuring. The meeting aboard the envoy was tense from the start. Admiral Zorn, a tall, stern-faced Vexillian, fixed Matthew with a piercing gaze. "Explain to me, human," Zorn's voice was cold, "the extent of your reproductive capabilities. How quickly do you intend to overrun this world?" Matthew blinked, taken aback by the directness of the question. He thought of Sarah, of the children playing in the colony's school, of the community they were building. "Admiral," he began, his voice steady, "we're not here to overrun anything. We're here to build a home, to create a future for our children. Yes, we hope to grow, but not at the expense of this world or its native life." As Matthew spoke, he found himself drawing on everything he'd experienced since arriving on this planet. He described the challenges they'd faced, the solutions they'd found, the bonds they'd formed. His words, practical yet impassioned, seemed to resonate with some of the alien diplomats present. Lyra watched Matthew with a mix of admiration and something deeper, more complex. When it was her turn to speak, she found herself defending the humans with unexpected fervor. "I've observed these people closely," she said, meeting Admiral Zorn's eyes. "Their adaptability, their resilience, the strength of their family bonds. It's unlike anything I've seen before. They don't just survive, they thrive, and they do it while caring for each other and their environment." As the discussions continued, tension began to build. Matthew could see the conflict in Lyra's eyes, the struggle between her duty to the council and her growing loyalty to the humans, to him. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. A junior officer burst into the room, his face ashen. "Admiral, the Zorgan ship has returned, with reinforcements. They're attacking both the colony and the envoy." In an instant, the dynamics of the room shifted. Admiral Zorn turned to Matthew, his expression a mix of suspicion and grudging respect. "It seems human that we find ourselves with a common enemy." Matthew nodded grimly. "Then let's face it together." As they raced to coordinate their defenses, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that this battle would change everything, for the colony, for the council, and for his relationship with Lyra. The future hung in the balance, and the real fight was only just beginning. The Zorgan attack came suddenly and with devastating force. Plasma beams lanced through the colony's defenses, shattering buildings and scorching the carefully tended fields. The celestial envoy, caught off guard, shuddered under the assault of Zorgan battlecruisers. Matthew gripped the arms of his chair as the command center rocked with another impact. "Status report," he barked, eyes fixed on the holographic display. "Shields at 30% and falling," a technician reported, voice tight with strain. "We've lost contact with sectors 3 and 7. Admiral Zorn's face was grim as he coordinated the envoy's defenses. "Our weapons are having minimal effect on their lead ship. It appears they've upgraded their technology since your last encounter." Matthew's mind raced, searching for a solution. "Lyra, what about the jamming device? Can we modify it to disrupt their systems?" Lyra's fingers flew over the console. "Possibly, but it would take time we don't have. And the colony—" Her words were cut off by another explosion. Through the viewport, Matthew watched in horror as a massive fireball engulfed the colony's main power plant. "We need to evacuate," he said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "Get everyone to the emergency shelters." For hours the battle raged. Human ingenuity and Galactic Council technology fought desperately against Zorgon aggression. When it was over, the Zorgon ships retreated, leaving destruction in their wake. The aftermath was grim. Matthew stood in what remained of the colony's central plaza, surveying the damage. Smoke rose from collapsed buildings, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt circuitry. Colonists moved through the rubble, faces shocked and voices hushed. "Matthew?" Dr. Tucker's voice cut through the haze. The doctor's face was streaked with soot, his usually pristine lab coat torn and stained. "We need help in the medical bay. We're overwhelmed with injuries, and our supplies are critically low." Matthew nodded, his throat tight. I'll send a team to salvage what we can from the storage facilities. What about Sarah and the baby? Dr. Tucker's expression softened slightly. They're safe. Sarah's helping with triage. Relief washed over Matthew, quickly followed by guilt. He should be with them, not here coordinating repairs. A shadow fell over them as Admiral Zorn approached, flanked by two of his officers. The Vexillian's usually impeccable uniform was singed and torn, a visible reminder of the shared ordeal. "Mr. Harris," Zorn said, his tone formal but lacking its earlier hostility, "your people fought admirably. I've authorized the transfer of medical supplies and repair technology from the envoy to assist in your recovery efforts." Matthew blinked, surprised by the offer. "Thank you, Admiral. We'll make good use of them." As Zorn nodded and turned to leave, Matthew called out, "Admiral, we could use some help with the distribution. Our infrastructure is in shambles." Zorn paused, considering. "Very well. I'll assign a team to assist you." His eyes met Matthew's, and there was a hint of something almost like respect in his gaze. "Perhaps we can discuss your colony's status within council space once the immediate crisis has passed." Over the next few days, Matthew threw himself into the relief efforts. He coordinated repair teams, helped distribute supplies, and spent long hours in strategy meetings with both colonial leadership and council representatives. The work was exhausting but necessary, and it kept him from dwelling on the deeper, more personal conflicts brewing beneath the surface. It wasn't until the fourth day after the attack that Matthew finally made his way to the medical bay to see Sarah and their child. The makeshift ward was crowded with the injured, the air heavy with the smell of antiseptic and the low moans of the wounded. Sarah was changing a bandage on an elderly colonist's arm when Matthew approached. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly at his appearance. "Matthew," she said, her voice a mix of relief and something harder to define, "you're alive." He reached out to embrace her, but she stepped back, gesturing to her blood-stained clothes. "I'm a mess," she said, but Matthew sensed it was more than that. "How's our little one?" he asked, trying to bridge the sudden distance between them. Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Sleeping, finally. Mrs. Abernathy's been watching him when I'm on shift." She hesitated, then added, "He cried for you, those first nights." The words hit Matthew like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to respond, but Sarah cut him off. "I know you've been busy. The colony needs you. But Matthew, we need you too." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've been so scared, and you weren't here." Matthew reached for her again, and this time she didn't pull away. He held her close, feeling the tremors running through her body. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry." As they stood there surrounded by the bustle of the medical bay, Matthew became acutely aware of Lyra watching them from across the room. The alien woman's expression was unreadable, but something in her stance spoke of loneliness and uncertainty. Matthew closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the competing emotions surging through him. He had responsibilities to the colony, to his family, and now, increasingly, to Lyra and the complex dance of interspecies diplomacy she represented. As he held Sarah, comforting her while seeking comfort himself, Matthew knew that the challenges ahead were far greater than mere physical reconstruction. The foundations of his world had been shaken, and in the aftermath of the Zorgan attack, he would have to rebuild not just a colony, but the very core of who he was and what he stood for. The future stretched out before him, a daunting tapestry of personal and political challenges. But for now, in this moment, Matthew allowed himself to simply be present, to be a husband and father, and to take strength from the resilience of the human spirit that surrounded him. The ground trembled beneath Matthew's feet as he stood atop the colony's makeshift watchtower. In the distance, a vast cloud of dust billowed on the horizon, growing larger with each passing moment. The native herbivores were coming. "How many?" Matthew asked, his voice tense. Dr. Tucker lowered his binoculars, his face grim. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. If they reach the colony—" Matthew nodded, understanding the unspoken threat. Their fledgling crops, already struggling to recover from the Zorgan attack, would be trampled in minutes. He keyed his communicator. This is Harris. I need all available personnel to report to the command center immediately. Within minutes, Matthew stood before a diverse group of humans and aliens, their faces a mix of tenacity and fear. He laid out the situation quickly, then turned to Admiral Zorn. Admiral, we need your help. Our defenses alone won't be enough. Zorn's expression was unreadable, but he nodded. What do you propose, Mr. Harris? Matthew's mind raced, piecing together a plan. We'll use the colony's weather control systems to create a barrier. Intense winds, localized storms, anything to slow them down. But we need more. To Matthew's surprise, Zorn's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. The Envoy's force field technology could provide additional protection. I'll have a team begin integration immediately. As the group dispersed to their tasks, Lyra approached Matthew. I've been analyzing the herd's movement patterns. If we can redirect them to the eastern grasslands, it could solve two problems at once. Matthew raised an eyebrow. How so? The grasslands are far enough from the colony to keep us safe, but close enough that we could study and potentially domesticate some of the animals. It could be a long-term solution to our food security issues. The plan took shape quickly. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians, integrating the Envoy's advanced systems with the colony's more rudimentary technology. Matthew coordinated from the command center, his voice steady as he directed teams and responded to crises. As the massive herd approached, the sky darkened ominously. Wind howled across the plains, driving sheets of rain before it. The herbivores slowed, confused by the sudden change in weather. Where the storm ended, a shimmering force field sprang to life, creating an impenetrable barrier. Matthew watched the sensors, his heart pounding. It's working, he breathed. They're turning east. Admiral Zorn stood beside him, observing the operation with keen interest. Impressive, he said at last. Your people have shown remarkable adaptability. Matthew seized the moment. Admiral, I'd like to propose something more long-term. A collaboration between humans and the Galactic Council. Zorn's eyes narrowed. Explain. Over the next hour, Matthew laid out his vision. He spoke of human ingenuity, of the potential benefits of sharing knowledge across species. At the heart of his proposal was a galactic fertility program, drawing on humanity's unique reproductive capabilities. Imagine, Matthew said, his voice passionate, a future where endangered species could be saved, where population imbalances could be addressed. We have so much to offer each other. Zorn listened intently, his expression thoughtful. Your proposal is intriguing, he said at last, but it will face opposition. Many on the council fear the rapid spread of humanity. Matthew nodded, having anticipated this. Then let's show them what we can do together. The herd, we can use it as a demonstration. Human agricultural techniques combined with alien technology to create a new habitat. It solves our immediate problem and showcases the potential of cooperation. The project moved forward at breakneck speed. Matthew found himself in the field more often than not, working alongside council scientists to transform the eastern grasslands. They used terraforming techniques to enhance the soil, created water sources, and established protective boundaries. Days blurred into weeks. Matthew threw himself into the work, driven by the stakes involved. It wasn't until he returned to the colony late one night, exhausted but exhilarated, that he realized the cost of his dedication. Sarah was waiting for him, her face a mask of almost unchecked emotion. We need to talk, she said, her voice flat. The conversation that followed was painful. Sarah spoke of loneliness, of feeling abandoned. She held their child, who stirred fitfully in her arms. You're never here, Matthew. You're building a future, but what about our future? Our family? Matthew reached for words but found none. The weight of his responsibilities to the colony, to humanity's future in the galaxy, pressed down on him. But as he looked at his wife and child, he felt a different kind of pressure, a void he hadn't even realized was growing. Before he could respond, his communicator chirped urgently. Admiral Zorn's voice crackled through. Harris, we have a situation. Report to the envoy immediately. Sarah's eyes flashed with hurt and anger. Go, she said, turning away. They need you. Matthew hesitated, torn between duty and family. but the urgency in Zorn's voice compelled him forward. With a heavy heart, he left, promising himself he'd make things right later. Aboard the envoy, he found chaos. Lyra stood before a hastily assembled tribunal, her face pale but defiant. Admiral Zorn's voice boomed through the chamber. "You stand accused of treason against the Galactic Council. How do you plead?" Matthew's mind raced, piecing together what had happened. Lyra had provided him with classified information that had been crucial to the colony's survival and to his proposals for cooperation. Without hesitation, Matthew stepped forward. "Admiral, members of the Council," he said, his voice ringing out, "I take full responsibility for Lyra's actions. She acted under my authority, in the interests of not just humanity, but of all species represented here." He spoke passionately of Lyra's contributions, of the lives saved and the opportunities created through her actions. As he finished, a tense silence fell over the chamber. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. A frantic voice came over the intercom. "Multiple Zorgon ships detected. They're on an attack vector." Matthew's blood ran cold. He turned to Admiral Zorn, seeing his own fear reflected in the alien's eyes. The Zorgons were back, and this time, they might not survive. Be stopped so easily. The gravity of the situation hit Matthew like a physical blow. He turned to Admiral Zorn, his mind already racing through potential strategies. "We need to evacuate the colony," Matthew said, his voice tight with urgency. "Our defenses won't hold against another full-scale attack." Admiral Zorn nodded grimly. "Agreed. We'll use the envoy to cover the evacuation, but where will your people go?" Matthew's response was interrupted by a frantic message from the colony's command center. "Sir, we've detected unauthorized access to Shuttle Bay 3. It's your wife, Matthew. She's preparing for launch with your child." The world seemed to tilt beneath Matthew's feet. In that moment, the competing pressures of his life, his duty to the colony, his role in galactic diplomacy, and his responsibilities as a husband and father, collided with devastating force. Without a word to Zorn or Lyra, Matthew sprinted from the envoy's bridge. He ran through the ship's corridors, his breath coming in ragged gasps. As he emerged onto the colony's surface, he could see the shuttle bay in the distance, its doors slowly opening in preparation for launch. Matthew's mind whirled as he ran. He understood Sarah's fear, her desperation to protect their child. But he couldn't let them leave, not like this, not with the Zorgons bearing down on them. More than that, he couldn't bear the thought of losing his family. As he approached the shuttle bay, Matthew made a split-second decision. He veered towards a nearby control panel, his fingers flying over the interface. Years of working with the colony's systems paid off as he quickly navigated through security protocols, initiating an emergency lockdown. The shuttle bay doors ground to a halt, then slowly began to close. Matthew could hear the whine of the shuttle's engines powering down as he finally reached the bay, slipping inside just before the doors sealed shut. Inside, he saw Sarah at the shuttle's controls, their child strapped securely in a seat behind her. Her eyes widened in shock as Matthew appeared, his chest heaving from the exertion. "Matthew, what are you doing?" Sarah's voice was a mix of anger and confusion. Matthew approached the shuttle slowly, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Sarah, please, we need to talk." Sarah's grip tightened on the shuttle's controls. "There's nothing to talk about. You've made your choices clear." "I know I've been absent," Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've put too much on you, on us. But please, give me a chance to explain." For a long moment, Sarah stared at him, conflict clear in her eyes. Then slowly, she released her grip on the controls and stepped out of the shuttle. Matthew closed the distance between them, reaching out to take her hands in his. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I've been so focused on securing our future that I've been neglecting our present." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I can't do this alone, Matthew. I need you. Our child needs you." "I know," Matthew said, drawing her close. "And I promise, from this moment on, we face everything together, as a family." He looked into her eyes, his voice gaining strength. "But we can't run, Sarah. What we're doing here, it's bigger than just us. We have a chance to secure humanity's place among the stars, to build a future for our child that we never could have imagined. Sarah listened, her expression softening. It's dangerous, she said, but there was less certainty in her voice. Matthew nodded. It is, but we're stronger together, and I believe in what we're building here. Will you trust me? Will you stay and be part of this with me? For a long moment, Sarah was silent. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll stay. But you have to promise me, Matthew. Promise me we'll face whatever comes as a family. Matthew pulled her into a tight embrace. I promise, he said fervently. No matter what happens, we're in this together. As they held each other, their child began to stir in the shuttle. Sarah broke away to tend to him, and Matthew used the moment to contact the command center. This is Harris, he said into his communicator. The situation in Shuttle Bay 3 is under control. Cancel the evacuation order. We stand and fight. He turned back to Sarah, who was now holding their child. The sight of them together filled Matthew with a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the approaching Zorgans, the complexities of galactic politics, he would face them with his family by his side. Just then his communicator crackled to life. It was Admiral Zorn. Harris, we've restored power to the colony's defenses and the envoy, and we're picking up new signals. Reinforcements are coming. Matthew's heart leapt. He looked at Sarah, a smile breaking across his face. It's not over, he said. We have a chance. As if in response to his words, the colony's warning klaxons began to blare. The Zorgans were entering the atmosphere, but this time, Matthew knew they would be ready. He took Sarah's free hand, squeezing it gently. Let's go, he said. We have work to do. Together they left the shuttle bay, stepping out into a world of uncertainty and possibility. The sky above was filled with the flashes of incoming ships, friend and foe alike. As Matthew led his family towards the command center, he felt a surge of purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it united. The battle for Proxima Centauri B, and perhaps for humanity's future in the galaxy, was about to begin.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.